Right, well, thank you all very much for coming to Indian Documentary, A Bright New Future. We'll find out whether it is a bright new future or not, and hopefully we'll all form part of making it one by the end of this session. My name's Rajesh Thind. I'm going to be moderating the panel. In India, there's a technical term in India called the non-resident Indian, which in India is known as the NRI. I consider myself an NRI, which I consider standing for not really Indian. And I feel very privileged that I am with four bona fide Indians, part of the Indian delegation, come over especially for the festival. I've been going back and forth a lot, and I can tell you we've got an absolutely fabulous panel who we'll be introducing in a moment. Before we do that, I'd just like to kind of get a feeling for who we've got in the audience. So we've been kind of asking ourselves why we're here. I'd just like to kind of find out why some of you are here. Can I ask who here has been to India? Put your hands up nice and high.
Oh, wow.
Marvellous, great. Who here has made a film or worked on a film in India? Okay, brilliant.
Wow.
And who here knows how to dance traditional forms of Indian dance in the bar later? If you put your hand up, you're going to be expected to prove it tonight. Okay. So now I'm going to ask the panel. So I'm going to just briefly introduce the panel and then ask each of them why they're here too. So on my left here, we have Ritu Sarin, a very experienced filmmaker who has worked both in India and internationally, made films for the BBC. He's currently making a film called When Harry Got Married, which has just received a Jan Vrijman grant as well as an ITVS grant and is looking fabulous. We'll see a clip of that later. Ritu, why are you here?
I'm here to participate in Meat Market. So it's the first time I'm doing that because I've sort of managed to stay away from these kind of pitching sessions. And it's interesting. So I've just had a morning, but it's very interesting to, I'll talk about it more later, but it's very interesting to show a clip from India and, how do we slot into television in the UK or in the West, what is the place we find? And I think it's a big question.
And you've been involved in, you're very familiar with the international scene. And
yeah.
How long, could you just tell us how long you've been sort of making films?
You don't want me to tell you that. I think I started my first film in 1983, along with my partner, Tenzing and my husband. So 1983. So first in the US, lived in the US and started filmmaking there, and then moved to England in the good old days of Channel 4, early days, and then moved back to India about 16 years ago. So I've been based in Dharamsala in Delhi.
Okay, that's great. Thank you very much. And next we have Sophie Sivaraman, who is from Bombay.
Sivaraman.
Sivaraman, I'm sorry. This is why I'm not really Indian, because I can't get all the pronunciations right, so don't worry if you can't. Why are you here, Sophie?
Well, I'm here because I come to learn about cross-media and all the various workshops that Sheffield has to offer, and hopefully get a lot more people interested in what India has to offer.
Great. Moving along, Gargi Sen, who is a doyen of the Indian documentary scene, runs a film festival in Delhi called Persistence Resistance, runs a distribution company called Under Construction, which has 300 titles going back to the mid-80s. There's nobody more knowledgeable about Indian documentary in the whole country, I think. Why are you here, Gargi?
I think I have said this earlier in other fora, I'm going to say it again. I think India is really the future. I think some of the ways we are making films is absolutely amazing. And that kind of filmmaking in the documentaries happened without any kind of serious support, either from television or from the state or any kind of an organized market. So I think there's something very interesting going on in India, and I'm really here to invite you all there.
Well, I think one of the interesting things about this panel and what we kind of like to bring out today is at the precise moment that structures in the West and the industries that we all know are breaking down, funding, distribution, all these revolutions, actually documentary in India has an opportunity perhaps in terms of, it's a bit like mobile phones in Africa. If you skip the landline, you don't have to worry about the old infrastructure. And one of the young filmmakers out of India who really is at the forefront of new forms of distribution, new forms of exhibition, and of absolutely fantastic visual language, is Amlan Dutta. Amlan, why are you here?
Hi, I'm a filmmaker and a producer, and I'm trying to, what should I say, I'm an independent filmmaker, and I'm trying to earn my sustenance out of it. So I've come here to connect to people. I believe in brotherhood. So I see a two-way process in this pipeline, okay? I'm here to look what should I say? I mean, invite collaborations of all kinds. It's not only with the broadcaster, distributor, but also with filmmakers, technicians, all kinds of two-way process. So that's why I'm here.
Okay, great. And in that spirit, we're going to make sure that this isn't one of those dull sessions where you sit here just listening. And so there are 2 roving mics, and rather than kind of wait for questions at the end, if you've got a question, stick your hand up and we'll come to you. If there's any point you want to jump in, let's make it more of a conversation than sort of, one-way street. I suppose we should start first with the title of the session. What are the potential futures for documentary in India? Amlan, why don't we start with you?
So I can only say that there is only future. I mean, to documentary filmmaking as a profession doesn't exist, Mukul. Yeah. I mean, you earn from somewhere else. I mean, everybody earns from somewhere else, and we make our self-expressive documentary films. It doesn't really work that way. So, I mean, there is no past precedence of people surviving making documentaries. So I can see there's only a future. And what we are trying to do is, Sophie, Gargi, they're all setting up things, and we are trying to look forward to a different mode of distribution where we can reach the people interface. I mean, I would rather say that we are here, we'll want to really build up a platform where we can compete with Bollywood, with our films. It's as simple as that.
Gargi, can I ask you?
Yeah, the future is, I think, immense and very bright, and I think Sheffield DocFest, in that sense, is rather symptomatic of what India has to offer. So if you were to look today, there is a film by Mani Kaul that screened this morning. This is a film made, it's a very old film, but it's a film that sort of looks at it generates a new kind of an aesthetics that's never happened in the documentary. You have a film by Abhijit Mukul Kishore, which is going to be screening in the competition today at 3:30 at Odeon. Mukul, that's him, filmmaker from India. We have Amlan here and Ritu, two very, very experienced, Ritu an experienced filmmaker, and Amlan who's doing something very incredibly fresh and new. And I think if you were to look at just these 4 kinds of strands, and of course this platform, is, I think, extremely wide. And I think this is, there's potential for learning, collaboration, and doing many things together. I know what we lack in India, and I know what we can contribute to the world. And maybe we'll pick up some of those later in the conversations.
Yeah, great. I mean, Sophie, I know that you're very engaged with futures as well, particularly in relation to, perhaps I could ask you to talk about the future of the audience for documentary in India and where you think that is and where that might be heading.
Documentaries in India has always been perceived as being very boring because of the kind of input, and we were forced to watch documentaries before a feature film. So the government showed maybe a 15-minute documentary, and then you got to see a feature film. So at that point of time, we always went out to have a cigarette, and then came back. So documentary became, associated with boring. So people in India very rarely watch a documentary, and if you mention the word documentary, it's considered boring. So to change perception of documentary, you had to make it look like, and they had a certain idea that people in documentary, they're really poor, they are very, have very strong opinions, they're very intellectual, and they come out with all these issue-based stuff, and each Indian is trying so hard to survive and struggle in the country that they don't want to go and watch somebody else's problems or know what's existing in their country because they are trying to deal with their own problems. So you had to, I feel that it was necessary to show documentaries which were just stories. Maybe it's an affair that's gone wrong, or maybe it's somebody's love story, or it's, just stories, and change the perception in that manner, and then slowly get people engaged in it. And in the period of few months that I've got involved in it, I think I started in September. In the few months that I've got involved in it, I find that a lot of interest has been shown in wanting to participate in documentaries. People want to put money, because India has money. There are a lot of people with money. So now people are interested in wanting to come and put money into documentaries on subjects. So I think there's a big future out there.
Okay, great. Rita, now you've sort of taken the other journey. You make films in India and sell them around the world. What do you think Sophie's talked about the future of documentary for Indian audiences. What do you think the future could, should, or might be for films made by Indians in India or by non-Indians in India and the international sphere? What do you think that?
Yeah, I think, we've got to discuss talk about what everyone else is dealing with, which is content. Content is now seen to be free. How are we going to place documentaries in this kind of shrinking world? So we need to take that on board. And if we're making, in India, we make a lot of socially relevant documentaries. So how are we going to take these documentaries out to the Indian audiences? I don't think we can just rely on television. I think we have to take all kinds of other models on, the internet, Wi-Fi, all kinds of other ways of getting it out to the people. Because if people make documentaries, there are two reasons we make documentaries for the most part. One is for getting out into the world, but a lot of Indians need to see the documentaries themselves. Vast amount, majority of Indians. And so I think we need to look at both of those.
So Gagi, as a distributor, don't Indians like documentaries at all? How do you swing it?
No, I think they love documentaries. I would not agree with this opinion at all, and I think this is an audience that's been created primarily by the filmmakers themselves. Because like Ritu said, that once you've made a film and there's no official outlet, there's actually very little funding, what do? You go out showing a film. And the institutions that came in to help this endeavor were the academic institutes in India. Sophie is, of course, absolutely right when she says that there has been an official strand of documentaries, thanks to the British, which we have learned from the British of the division films, which set up in the 20s through the Germans. It's a very complex history, which continues after independence for propaganda of the state. So these 20-minute documentaries were made and are still being made and used to be screened before fiction in theatres, and have given, in the popular mind, a fairly sad association to the documentary as boring, like Sophie rightly pointed out. But there has been, from the 70s, 70s with the sort of the world movement of the third cinema, and then 80s, a new kind of, when Ritu and people have started to make film, a new kind of aesthetics coming in. And it's these 80s, the newer filmmakers who have actually created across the country audiences. And the audiences exist. Now the problems are two. The problem is that this has totally been the single-handed efforts of individual filmmakers. And they have worked with academic institutions. This audience is not a paying audience. And my work as a distributor is to really aggregate the audience and to make them pay. And I think that's where I see my work.
It sounds very familiar. Sorry, George, go for it.
Yeah, just a basic question. So, is it Adnan?
Amlan.
You were saying you needed technicians and you needed people to help you make your films. What are you shooting on? Is it film? Is it video? And why do you need? What kind of technicians do you need? Surely there's a good pool of technicians.
More about
no, it's not a need actually. I'll explain. What I meant was it's collaboration. Is say for I'm myself a cinematographer. Okay, so the light is different. Okay, so it will be a great experience for a cinematographer from Europe to work in India. Okay. And the way we approach the imagery is whatever. So there can be a collaboration, there can be exchange of ideas. What I'm trying to say is we need to get exposure on both sides. We need to see your films, you need to see our films. I need to work with you, you need to work with us. Then it will be synergy. So if the synergy works here with the makers, the synergy will be there in the audience too. We can just broaden both of our resources in both sides. That's what I'm talking about.
I just want to pick this up a little bit. I think it's also about the language of cinema. It's also how you tell a story. It's also how you're constructing your text. It's also how the budgets you work under, which becomes a decisive factor in the kind of storytelling mechanism that you use. We work with pittance in this country. So I think in my country, filmmakers like him will tell you, Mukul here. Mukul's experience, Ritu, doesn't find money in India. We work with pittance, so I think we are far more creative, if that's making sense to you. And the language of cinema that's evolved, and with people like him, is very, very unique. It's not the same. So for instance, in my festival this year, we had two filmmakers. We had Kim Longinoto's work, at a retrospective of her work, and Rahul Roy, both of who use the observational mode, for instance. But Rahul's observational mode is an observational mode where he is invested in the observational mode. You'll have to see his film to see what I'm meaning. But today, in this festival, you're going to see sometime today Grey Garden, the Males Brothers, the observational form of the documentary. And has anyone seen the Grey Garden here? Okay. Please see it, because it's the observational mode. And it's when it's starting. There is a shot of the brother who shoots, I forget, the elder brother, of himself in the camera. And today, about 30 years later, we can start to see what was happening. And I think what was happening is a subversion of the observational mode. And I think that is something you will see very clearly in works from India.
I think this is probably perhaps a convenient time to have a look at a clip. I always think nice to look at things. So maybe if we could, we're going to show, Amlan, could you just introduce the clip that we're going to show from your film?
Well,
tell us a bit about the film.
I'm working with a very remote community up in the Himalayas, and my name of my film is, the title of my film is One Day Ahead of Democracy. This film is about democracy, the poster of my film says, I do not believe in this democracy and I do not vote. So, and my film deals with a very taboo subject like cannabis. He talks about why it should be decriminalized. So it's a very controversial subject. It would be a controversial film, but this clip has got nothing to do with it. This clip is. My film is a long film. It's a 2-hour-long film. It's done in an epic structure. So this clip is the introduction of the film. So you take a look at it. It's got nothing to do with democracy or cannabis, but it will tell you what's happening with all of us.
Let's take a look at the clip.
Yes, please.
Okay, if we could run the clip, please.
पूरी दुनिया में जितने भी पाप और धर्म होता है वो है दिखता है पहाड़ में दाएं तरफ का पाप का है और ये धर्म का इस साइड वाला है और बीच में आदमी जो देवी देवताओं को कुछ करने गया था इसलिए ये पत्थर का बन गया बोलते हैं कि जब ये सारा का सारा धर्म वाला पत्थर पिघलेगा तो ये दुनिया ख़त्म हो जाएगा ये पृथ्वी ख़त्म हो जाएगी कम होता रहा है देखो पहले ये धर्म का बड़ा था पाप का छोटा अभी ये बहुत बड़ा हो गया पाप वाला धर्म वाला कम होता जा रहा पिघल रहा है ना देखो टुकड़े टुकड़े और ये जब ख़त्म हो जाएगा तो पूरा दुनिया का सारा सीन ख़त्म हो जाएगा
Now, rather than ask you to comment on your own clip, I'm going to, we touched on this earlier, and I'm going to ask Gargi to quickly talk about Amlan's clip, yeah.
And maybe just a little bit more of his work, because his work has a kind of a visuality which is absolutely stunning. It's both meditative, it's visceral, you sense, I've seen a shot of a rice in one of his earlier work, which you can actually smell and almost taste the work. So I think his work is, despite what he's saying about cannabis and everything, it's a very visual story. You just go into his work. It's sort of seductive and draws you in, and rare kind of visuality, very, very rare.
And just to put a bit of context for those that I'm sure a lot of you are very aware, but just to put a bit of context in terms of India's trajectory, China over the last 10 years has really established itself at the sort of top table of documentary, both in terms of production and distribution. A lot of that work's been done out of the film festival in Guangzhou. And they're really, there's commissioners are going every year, they're buying films every year, there are established producers. And India yet hasn't done that. Part of the reason is this question of visual language. And I was at a workshop in the Satyajit Ray film school in Calcutta called Doc Age, which we'll mention later. And we had a lot of commissioning editors there, and it was interesting because it was obvious that as much as the young Indian filmmakers who were being trained to pitch and do the whole sort of, pitching circus that we all do here. As much as they were learning to speak the language of international co-production, it was also about kind of the international buyers learning to be able to hear the language of Indian cinema making. Rita, you've kind of been bridging this West and East kind of, barrier, and you kind of understanding of both sides. How have you coped with that? And what challenges have you found in the reception?
I think in a sense because there is no money for documentary filmmaking in India, so people more or less go out and make the films they want. They're not really thinking about the audience very much for the most part. This kind of film, it was interesting for us because about, I think, it was 50 years of Indian independence, so I guess that was 1997. We were part of a series of Indian filmmakers that made films on the subject, and Tenzing and I, we had a subject given to us, sustainable development, and we actually followed the brief very, very closely and delivered on time, under budget, all of that stuff. And everybody else, not everyone, but most of them actually went and made whatever film they wanted. Took however long they wanted. It was like, and they made some wonderful films. I think actually some of them made better films than we did. I've got to give it to them. And I was like, how can you do this? And they were like, well, somebody's giving you money to make a film. You might as well, take the opportunity and grab it and do what you want. So I think we have that in India. As soon as we come into the marketplace, like I'm here in the marketplace, and it's a whole different thing. It's like, why is this subject relevant? Why is anybody interested in India? What is this India they're interested in? How do we reach out to those audiences? And when I first worked in the UK, there was some slots still for anthropological films. There was Under the Sun. There were slots for other countries and the world outside. And now those kinds of slots have shrunk. There are sort of, big issues, maybe, which involve the world. So those slots don't exist, the kind of slots that we made films for. And I'm also, now with this film that I'm here with, I'm trying to figure out, who's out there who's interested in this. They like the idea. I think people like the idea now of this new India, like, show us this new India, and I think that's one area we could, if we want to deal with the international marketplace, I think we can move forward in that way. But when we live in India, we're not even looking at that through those eyes. As you remember, I was at Dock Edge as well. A lot of the films were about traditional theatre. The traditions that we are losing, we are kind of concerned with that. But the rest of the world looks at that, and it could be anywhere. It could be in Bali. It could be anywhere in the world. It looks like the same stuff they've been seeing on telly, and they don't want to see that. And I think that's one of the things that I am obviously having to deal with in Meat Market. And I'll see as soon as I put on my clip, which you will see soon. It's a very easy story, I think. It's about an arranged marriage, but it's a humorous film about our local taxi driver and his arranged marriage. And so we have a nice narrative structure, a central character who's funny, who's very frank. We have good access, all the things that you think, will work for a broadcast slot. And through that, we are bringing in social issues. So, we are dealing with caste, we are dealing with changing India, tradition and modernity. And yet, as soon as I turn on the clip, I notice the commissioning people come. It just looks like typical old India, the kind of India we used to see. They don't see the little subtle changes that I see, or Gargi, or all of us would see. We would see the mobile phone, the love on the mobile phone. That's unique because in India they only had, in that area, the connectivity only came about 2 years ago. So what is unique to us is not unique. It looks like the same stuff that people in the West have been seeing, and they're really on the slots.
Well, let's take a look at your clip. I think that's a good moment to take a look at. So the film's called When Harry Got Married. What stage are you at this point?
We've almost finished the shoot, and we're editing, and we should be finished by November. So I'm looking for, co-production money.
And you've had some success already. You've had some. Can you just tell us what?
Today?
No, not today, but up to before today.
Yeah, no success.
You've had Jan Vrijman.
Jan Vrijman, ITVS International Call. So both of those are, you go into the system and you come out the other end, or you don't. So there's nothing you can do. Okay. And I think so. They see the appeal, and I think I've got to say this. I think some of those people are interested in social issues. So now if I was making a film not about a social issue at all, then that funding wouldn't be available either.
Okay, let's take a look at the clip.
मतलब उस टाइम बोलता है लड़की देख लो बस मेरे को बोला तो लड़की के देखनी चाहिए थी चली गई लड़की 1 सेकंड में मैंने देखी मैंने बोला कि छोटी है लड़की हाइट में मैं इससे शादी नहीं करूँगा
मैंने शर्म के मारे देखा ही नहीं तो मैंने सोचा पता नहीं बाद में हाँ करेंगे कि ना करेंगे क्या पता.
Good morning.
Good morning.
I love you.
Same to you.
नहीं बोला I love you बोल तो मैं. मजा आ रहा है.
Sophie, would you like to just comment on this sort of question again in terms of, for example, with Ritu's film? I mean, you're working very future-facing and really kind of trying to develop new ways to bridge the two markets and the various markets.
I think, frankly, I don't think we understand the film. I'll tell you why. Because it's like Indian food. You know, you have rice, then you have curry, then you'll have one vegetarian dish here, then you'll have another vegetarian dish here, then you'll have some dry mutton, then you'll have another curry, you'll have this, and you keep mixing it and eating. You know, that's the style. So our filmmaking also has that style. You'll have one structure, and then you'll have something else coming in, and then something else coming in, and something else coming in. And that's the way we eat our food, that's the way the films are made, you know? So it becomes very, you know, one aspect of it is, okay, this is what the perception of India is. Another aspect is that you have all these threads which are coming in constantly, which tend to get a little confusing, you know? It's like Nick came to Bombay, and there was a swimming pool barbecue party happening, and he came there and he looked at the barbecue party and he said, why don't we see this part of India? You know, why do we always see the usual India? Why don't we see this part of India? And I was frankly thinking, yeah, you don't see the India which you know, a normal, this is what everybody sees. This is what, you know, people see. They expect to see the poverty. They expect to see an arranged marriage. They expect to see, this is what India is perceived at. But there's a lot more of India. There's like Amlan's film, for example. There's a visual of him. There's always a stimulus. Like he says, every 5 minutes there's a stimulus, so it keeps your interest going. When I was watching the film, I was like shocked because there is a 3-year-old kid who's sitting there and making a marijuana. So he's making a ball. She's making this ball of ganja, and it got your interest totally into it. Then there's another strand came in which kept the stimulus going. You know, you were interested in something else of it. So that is the language generally that the Indians speak, which you need to get into. But now with dockage coming in and with the training sessions that are happening, you're getting to work in the way the broadcasters expect you to work. So we need to work a bit on that.
So there's a definite, I'd like to kind of open it up a bit. I know there's filmmakers here who've been making films in India. I'm looking at you, Andrew, because I know you've been spending a lot of time in India in the last couple of years. Can I just ask, can we just get Mike to Andrew? In terms of your experience of making films in India, what have been, just to kind of switch it around a little bit, what have been your experience and the challenges and some of the sort of benefits and the obstacles that you found?
Is this on?
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I just spent 3 months in India at the end of last year, beginning of this year. I attended the ESO doc training. I just felt it's a massive opportunity, just huge potential. Yeah, language is obviously a challenge.
Did you collaborate with, apart from fixers and the such, did you collaborate creatively with any sort of local Indians? Is that something you'd be interested to do in the future?
No, I'd love to, yeah.
Are there other people who'd be interested to do that here? Could you put your hands up, just to actually working side by side with Indians and projects? Okay, that's great. Well, I think that's something to take forward out of this session as well. Yes, just behind Andrew. Sorry, just with the mic.
I'd like to ask a question responding to something that Sophie was just talking about. Is there an appetite to see a different face of India?
Pardon?
Is there an appetite to see a different face of India?
You mean in India or in the
India
West?
or outside?
Well, in India. Because India's... Yeah.
I mean, I'm sorry, I didn't understand.
Is there an appetite to see?
I mean, if you were...
You're talking about... You're saying that we see the same vision of India, which we're getting tired of seeing. Is there an appetite to see a different face of India? So we don't just see the poverty,
I think it's, first and foremost, we have to battle the fact that people don't like watching documentaries. I mean, a new audience doesn't like watching documentaries. The people who watch documentaries are the documentary junkies anyway. But to actually get other people to watch documentaries, then you need to give them something else to see, because they do not want to watch the problems that exist in the country.
Sorry,
can I just take this?
Just while we wait for the mic, we're just going to go to Gargi. Sorry, Gargi.
I didn't get your name, but if you were to open Indian television anytime during the day, you would have this other story. 20% of India lives a life of a global person. 80% of India, India has this amazing projection of growth, 8% growth. We were not so-called touched by the September 2008 global meltdown. We are still showing 8% growth. What's possibly happening is that there's a movement of money upwards. So if you were to open television at any time, you will see billionaires, you will see people around doing barbecues around swimming pools, you will have, and that's exactly the image that television is showing. And that is one India. And there is another India. That also requires representation, no longer in that patronizing, look at these poor people and let's get their voices out there, but more as extremely interesting sorts of stories like the kinds Amlan is bringing. These are hugely gripping stories which are not making any claims to change the world or being socially relevant. They're great stories. Of course, we all come from we come from a country, we are artists in a country where your whole existence as an artist is premised on your politics. So you can't separate the two, but that's part of you, that's how you are. So yes, there is a need for these stories. And just one quick last word, that if you were to look at, say, work of Mukul, please do have a look at this film called Vertical City. It's showing today at 3:30 at the Odeon.
For a bit of system.
So this is another kinds of stories. I think Indians are telling different sorts of stories. They are no longer only stories about poverty. Does the West want to listen? That's a question.
Okay. So hold on a second. Sorry, George. So we're going to go to Hugh Purcell, who's head of studies for ESODoc, European Social Documentary, who last year ran their first training workshop in India. He's also here with Heidi Grunner, who's head of ESODoc. Hugh, do you want to come in at this?
Well, what I was going to say was, I think we're all looking for the documentary version of Monsoon Wedding. No, I mean it. That is the kind of middle-class India we can relate to, which is amusing and nevertheless speaks volumes about India. Personally, I don't think there will be a really bright future for documentaries in India unless there's less money released to documentary strands on Doordarshan, NDTV, and so on and so on. You can't just rely on the West for your markets. That's the trouble, because we're all chasing the same decreasing amounts of money.
So I think this is a really interesting point. So just before I come to you, I just want to ask, of the filmmakers here, how many of you are exploring new forms of distribution, new forms of fundraising, crowdfunding? Can you put your hands up if you've kind of engaged with those sorts of ways of working? Okay, great. I mean, it seems to me there's a conversation there, because actually the two ways are beginning to come closer together. At the back there.
Yeah. Do Indian TV channels actually invest in documentaries?
No.
No.
They don't?
Not at all.
In fact, there was a documentary slot on NDTV, one of the few.
Yeah.
I think that's on hold. Even that one slot is
No,
on
that's not on hold, but that's acquisition. There is acquisition that NDTV does, and for that it's a one slot a week, so it's 52 slots. But they also acquire not just Indian programs, they also acquire international programs, and they pay the same.
So if I make a film in India, a doc, I will find no buyer in India, that means?
No.
Right, so I have to rely on Channel 4 here, someone here to buy it then.
But maybe not.
This
but
is
maybe
not. That's the future.
And I think this is the interesting future that we have, because I would just like to flag what you had said, because I think that's extremely important. But come back to that, about looking for funding outside of the country. Because please do see that there are filmmakers. I have 300 films, of which I would say at least 200 are Indian, independent films. These are films that are being made. These are filmmakers who are working under difficult circumstances, certainly. I mean, this is not easy. There's no television money, there's no funding, there are no foundations. So you have to be strategic, and you have to actually create your work of art, right? But it's happening, and there's some amazing work coming. And then we are working now to create a market and create ways. And it cannot be television because we are not going to create television. I think television, honestly, if you ask me, has shot itself in the foot. And the crisis of television in Europe is a crisis of Western, capitalism. So I don't see it reviving, honestly. I don't see the funds that are shrinking getting bigger. So we are looking for different mechanisms, and you in this country will very soon look for different ways of raising funds.
Javed Jaffrey has sponsored us to come here. He's a Bollywood actor. Okay, he's a comedian. I mean, nobody even thought that he would support documentaries. But now he's setting up a foundation which is going to be funding documentaries, a fund for documentaries. Yeah.
So you want to tell us, I was going to come and ask you about that.
He sponsored us to come here. This is the first time ever that a Bollywood actor has thought of coming into.
What are going to be the aims of the foundation, Sophie, that you're setting up with Javed?
Well, I'm helping him set it up. It's a totally new area for me to set up a foundation. So right now we're still working on the trustees level. It's called the Indian Documentary Foundation. But it's to create a corpus fund for funding documentaries every year. I mean, at least give startup funds to Indian documentary filmmakers or international documentary filmmakers who are making subjects on India. And that's his aim. So you set up a whole lot of people who are going to put in money into it. And another thing is he's attaching himself to a forum which is based on Indian NRIs who support entrepreneurs in India. And we are going to be setting up a panel which selects projects and putting it into this forum, and they come in with money into documentaries. And the other thing that the foundation wants to do is to support documentary initiatives in the country. So, like it could be Dockage gets supported or festivals get supported, and various things like that.
Yeah, and hot off the press. I mean, this is all part of a wave. So hot off the press, and from spring next year, Sundance labs are starting up in India. Initially with fiction, and then the following year with documentary labs. So the same Sundance model that's been used in California is now going to also be coming to India's, and that's in coordination with a large corporation in India who make tractors. So there's a real kind of interest in, so there's new ways of working, which in the same way that things are breaking down here, branded advertising programs have just come in here, the law has changed. It's, in a way, the kind of two bits of the rope are meeting in the middle. So there was another question, sorry, that gentleman there. Yeah. Can we get the mic to you, because we're recording? Thank you.
Yes. I was just asking, one of the benefits that India has is the potential for a very large Indian diaspora audience. And so are there ways and means of making programs in India and making programs in the diaspora which can be of interest domestically and internationally, so that you don't have to go to the established outlets to deliver Indian stories to Indians in the diaspora and at home?
Do you know, next week I'm pitching to a bunch of Indian hedge fund managers for money. Indians who live here and work in the financial industry.
It's a question of how you deliver. Yeah. I mean, because there aren't channels, established channels, so it's a question of how you get these. I mean, I would suggest that, in Vancouver, where I live, there are, in the multiplexes, there are Indian films, and that's the slate of Indian films for this week, and then the next week there are a next lot. Your documentaries could come in there.
I'd just like to, this word diaspora, it's very interesting for us who live in India, because this term diaspora really means nothing to us, because we are already a diaspora in the country. You must understand this is a country with 17 official languages and 5,000 dialects, And the diaspora that exists outside the country is really language-based. So the Tamil diaspora will not definitely support Amlan's work, which they will consider as Bengali. And in India, we don't see it like that. And I think moving back to the Western Indian diaspora is for us going backwards few steps. So I'll be very cautious there.
It's true.
But on the other hand...
we're backward, it's true.
On the other hand, I think... I think, let's say it, for globalization, whatever, there is money in India today. I mean, I am doing a festival later in the year in London. I make this festival called Persistence Resistance, and we're doing it, and it's a kind of a format that we can repeat anywhere. We're doing a festival in London with Indian money. No one here is supporting anything. So that's possible today, you know.
Sorry, just wait for the mic, sorry.
I counter it, obviously, from the analogy, if you like, with reggae music. I mean, Jamaica is tiny, but because it had the diaspora populations, it was able to export reggae, and reggae acquired an international size and scope way beyond Jamaica's base because of that diaspora and because of the crossover that then occurred within the local within each local population. You know, so that, you know, and so I mean, like for instance, English reggae had a different feel to Jamaican reggae because it had been influenced by the local things, and all of these things became very exciting and very interesting. Now, that's a kind of model. Now, I understand that, you know, it's different. You know,
it's a different history. You know, it's a completely different history. You have corner shop here. I think it's there in Sheffield also, but people, you know, okay. Just
but I would disagree with you to some extent, Guy, because I think there is some scope here. I think there is different, of course, but there are parallels as well. I mean, Sophie, I mean, Bollywood, it's fiction Bollywood films, have been working on this model for 20 years now, where a large part of their revenue is actually, you know, in this country, every single week, one of the top 10 grossing films is a Bollywood film. And it appears at maybe 20 or 30 screens around the country. And every week, one of those films makes $1 million.
But see where it started from, Rajesh.
No, but I would like to say, you know, it's strange because I just want to take up on the Sundance lab that's coming to India, which is with this big corporation. I got called by the guy who runs that, and he wanted me to answer this question. He called me in just to answer this question, but said, why? Because they put out a call for scripts, and every script that came, it's a fiction lab, every script that came, the director was a documentary filmmaker. And he couldn't understand why a documentary filmmaker is putting in a fiction script, and why are there no fiction guys putting in a script? And I couldn't answer that question, really. I mean, I looked at him wondering. He said, is this a way for them to just get into fiction? Why are the only documentary film guys approaching for this lab, a fiction lab?
Well, it might be, Sophie, because Bollywood is, you know, fiction people are so kind of hooked into Bollywood. And so, you know,
But you have the independent film guys anyway, you know, the small indie filmmakers. But I found that strange, actually.
Go to
I couldn't answer it.
Question there from Tom. I have a question. Sorry, just, can we get just there? Right there.
Okay, so it's called Bright New Future. I'd just like to pick up on a point that was made about traditions and about audiences in India being interested in traditions. So what kind of, in terms of cultural heritage, how responsible are documentary makers to that heritage? Because that's something that fascinates me. I want to make a film about Carnatic music in India. But you know, I don't know where's my audience for that. Could that be an Indian audience? Would they be interested? Would they let me in as a Westerner into those kind of, you know, very heavy academic classical music areas of the culture? So
that's the question. To that?
Yeah, I mean, Indians are. See, the thing is, we have a very strong folk culture, so that still continues. It's unfortunate that the documentaries didn't get a platform to get distributed to reach its people in India. And perhaps now this is the need of the hour. That's why we're addressing it today. If you're making a film on Carnatic music, there will be certain interest even in Indian audience as well. It's not only with the Western audience. Definitely true. Every year, many films gets made, and even in informal screening, Gargi and Sophie, they organize festival. We organize festival, and we've seen many of these films actually working with people. Even if it's not very well made, not very cinematic, but even something about some particular singer who's not known, but something like that, it works. It really works.
And what about, and in terms of this, because I think this area of collaboration between, you know, filmmakers in the West and filmmakers in India is a really interesting area. So in terms of that, what would be your response to, you know, Tom wanting, if Tom turned up in Calcutta and went, okay, let's make a film?
Yeah, I mean...
music, that's good.
On Carnatic music.
On whatever it is.
Whatever. When I said, earlier...
What do you think are the possibilities in that collaboration? You talked about collaboration. What do you think is the future of how people can work better between India and the West?
See, it's about ways of saying, right? You know, we all have different kind of eyes, and there is different perspective. So a collaboration always enhances your perspective. Like why I said that was like my film was done in co-production with NHK. And last year in March in Tokyo, I worked with an editor for 2 weeks who didn't speak English. To read my film, he has to really stop, pause button, and take out his dictionary to read the subtitle, okay? So what happened was practically, I was sitting like an editor, he was sitting behind like a director. And he put life in my film. He took my film beyond verbosity. He put life in my film. I have seen that happening in 2 weeks, working with a Japanese editor who didn't speak English. So this is what I'm talking about. You know, collaboration I'm talking about much more fundamental, not about just exchange of money. That will happen. If we collaborate, then perspective, we can exchange perspective. We will both grow as makers, and we can, you know, we can expand that growth to the audience also. See, I'm in a desperate situation. I have to reach my audience. I wanted to address you actually. See, the thing is, see, I've made a very political film, and I told that's why I introduced my film with a very strong political and controversial film. And I know this is going to work in India. And because cannabis is part of our culture, you know. I mean, most of the people smokes, and yeah. So I mean, for whatever reason, there will be a tremendous curiosity to watch my film. And I know if I release this in the metros, people will pour in. I want to distribute my DVDs for free. I've set up websites, I've set up a charitable trust, I'm trying to give sustenance to these people. And see, the people I'm working with, they only had hashish to earn money. They were like a self-sufficient indigenous community even 35, 40 years back. They didn't have no interaction with the outside world. They're very fine. After we went there, after we gave them money, their entire society changed. Now they're in a mess. Now it is banned, so they get as they're like criminals. So I thought I'll give them sustenance, and last 1 year I've been spending my time just to build that up. And in that process I realized, well, I don't have sustenance myself. So we are in the same situation. Those remote people and me are no different at all. So, and this is what I'm trying to put forward now, that to push that, both the things together to push that in the conscience of people, that this needs to be supported. Even that's why I'm saying I'm fighting for my dignity in India as a documentary filmmaker. To exist as a documentary filmmaker and earn my profession, it's like it's my profession.
But that's, sorry, can I say something? Because I think it's Hugh, right? You brought up this point that we need to find places on television, we need to find money from the state, from foundations. We really need to do that, because I think that's a very, very important thing. I mean, absolutely. I know that people have, sorry, I know people have made attempts, but I think that's something that we as Indian documentary filmmakers really need to push.
Yes. Can I just briefly, I'm so pleased about this foundation. I think that's very good news. I just want to add 2 things. Q, whose actual email is Q is a
filmmaker, a very interesting filmmaker. Full name is Kaushik Mukherjee, who makes both documentary and fiction. He made a film called Love in India, and also just recently made his first fiction.
He then made a ghastly film about cannabis. I mean, so cynical and destructive, which I saw at the Berlinale, by the way, just to mention it. When I talked at the Indian
Gandu, you mean?
Yeah, Gandu. When I taught at the Indian National Film School, I saw some lovely folk films on Kathakali dancing in Kerala, for example, and the students there, who were very snobbish, if I might say so, said, oh, those films are for you Western tourists. We're not really interested in that kind of folk art ourselves. We just do those for the West. I just throw that in.
Yeah. Sorry, I'd like, yeah.
Let's just read it.
Hold on a second. I've been trying to talk for a long time now. So I've never been to India. I'd love to go one day, and I hope you invite me soon. I like your comment about no budgets, because you can make what you like. You're not controlled by the commissioning editors, and I like that. I make films with no budgets. Well, actually, we do have budgets every now and then. But it's a process. It's participatory. We involve people in the whole role. It's not the end product, it's the process of making the film, which is important, and processes are very important, and how you involve people. So we don't care about the audience. India is full of stereotypes of India, Bangladeshi, Himalaya, I don't really know.
The stereotypes aren't in India, the stereotypes are in the mind of the people.
Exactly. The mind of us coming to India. So we need to kind of break that down. So my final question is, what kind of issues should we be looking at? And what are the interesting issues in India that we should be making films about? Thank you very much, Rajesh.
It's okay, good. Do you want to come back on that? Is it related to that? Let's just come back on it. It's a kind of very big question, isn't it?
Okay.
Rita, you want to come in?
What kind of, sorry, you're saying as a person living in the UK, what kind of films should you make about India?
So what do you suggest we come and make documentaries about? What social issues should we explore?
It's a good question.
I mean, would you be doing that completely on your own, or would you be doing that with an audience in mind?
With a team.
With a team. With an audience, a UK
We
audience
don't
in
really
mind?
care about the audience.
Okay, all right, thank you. Well, then you've got to follow your heart, is all I'd say. Follow your heart and, make the film you want. I don't think...
What social issues should we explore?
No, I know that's for Indian filmmakers to really kind of consider, because in India also we don't have one India. We have an urban India, a rural India. There's a huge divide.
It's a big place. There's lots of...
The Cambridge economist Joan Robinson once very famously said about India that anything you can say about India, the opposite is also true. And so that's why it's very difficult to sort of answer that question.
Like I'm right now living in rural India, so this film is very much based in rural India. It's a kind of film you can make if you spend a lot of time there. And I think it may look to somebody like oh, they're just doing an arranged marriage film for a Western audience, but it's not that. But I think that's something that, again, that's where perception is. It's a very sensitive issue. You have to understand the details, and your perception of the issue has to be, I guess, fine-tuned. It's like once we it's about looking, right? If we learn how to look, we can see the detail.
I think you should just get on a Harley-Davidson bike, travel the whole of India, and every 5 minutes you'll think like, oh, I need to do a film about that. And then another 5 minutes later you'll say, oh, I need to do a film about that. And then you keep on doing that, the whole part of the country, you'll come back and you'll have like 1,000 issues that you want to make a film.
The problem with that, though, Sophie, is that, I mean, I know loads of kind of Western journalists and filmmakers who go to India, and especially the journalists, from the day they arrive, they normally have about 18 months to 2 years where it's almost like they have to get those old stories that everybody who's just arrived in India has to get out of their system. Mm-hmm. The lepers and the polio and the farmer suicides, maybe some saris, maybe a bit of Bollywood, it's almost sort of something you have to get over before you can almost sort of get into it deeper, I think. Just at the back. Sorry, Gargi and then at the back, after you.
To respond to what you're saying, because I think I'll take up from what Omlan was saying. I think if you're looking at collaboration and if you're looking at process, if process is what is important to you, then you're looking at partnership. And then you would then find a filmmaker to work with. And it would be a joint kind of an exploration. And both of you can say to hell with the audience, and that'll be perfectly fine. But I think what we are insisting on, I think, is a sense of respect and dignity. Because till now what happens is that the times of Ritus and all has gone. Now collaboration really is little Western money and Indian technical labor. There are of course different attempts like Isodoc, etc. But by and large, look at the kinds of monies that's coming in. Look at the commissioning editors. Look at what percentage of that money comes into India. I think what we are talking about now is real collaboration. So if there's an artist and artist collaboration, something else will emerge. That's one. And also to respond to the earlier question about Carnatic music, anything. In India, we are 2 billion people, please don't forget. And even if 0.1% of that 2 billion looked at your film, and they might, it's bigger than Europe. I mean, look at the scale. It's an incredible scale, and there are different kinds of interests. And it's a very varied country. We live in simultaneous histories, simultaneously. So it's very difficult for you to say, this is India. Because you have, say, to give you a Marxist analysis, that you have the most, high-end electronic industry, and you have hunter-gatherers. And you have everything in between.
What is really nice, I think, Amlan, is your distribution. He started a merchandise on his film.
We're going to come to that in a second. I'm going to take a question because we're going to talk all about sort of distribution and for those people who do care a little bit about the audience or care about money, we'll come to that in a second. Those people, let's go to the back and then we'll take a couple more questions.
You live there, so it's easy for you to shoot. What practical problems would I have to turn up there and shoot? Do I need permissions, embassy, Ministry of External Affairs?
It's a very good question. Who'd like to answer that?
Yeah, you need to get clearances.
You need to get clearances. Ideally, you should collaborate with a producer in India who will handle all your production for you.
No, but it's pretty simple. If you go onto the website, it's these you need permissions, but these are quite simple. And it's on the website, so you have to just apply. There's a small fee. And once you have this, whether you have a producer in India or not, you will still, coming from outside India, require to get certain permissions. But now it's all online.
But you'll get ripped off.
I mean, you can have a production manager in India working for you and get these permissions done. That's not a major issue, actually.
Yeah,
Can we just agree right now, all of these things that are coming up in terms of potential collaborations, be they creative, be they logistical, be they advice, are you all happy to have your doors open? Can we make this beginning of lots of beautiful relationships? Can people come to you? And ask
Yeah, please. I keep my email ID, just mail me. You get your permissions done.
Okay, let's go to you, and then we'll go to you, and then we'll go to Simon.
Yeah, I'm just curious about the internal market in India, which is quite fascinating. I mean, where can you, as an Indian North or South, see a documentary today, an Indian documentary?
Sorry, where do you see it?
Where can you see it? Where's the channel platform?
You'll have to buy
You'll have to think
Do you have to go to Delhi to the festival?
You just have to think outside television. Please remember that television is also
very
much grounded in time, so you do not see it again on television.
No. Where physically can you, as a South Indian from Kerala, where do I go and see a documentary from your festival up from north, or from the Himalayas? Where can I see it?
You'll have to buy it from either the filmmaker's website or
from us,
or from
so the internet.
Yeah, it's
That's
internet.
The channel.
I mean, it's so. For instance, even when we did our festival, the film streamed through those 3 days. So it wasn't.
Because I'm just curious. I've been last 20 years back and forth to India, the whole over India, and I love it. But it's because the potential is there. I mean, as you said, the middle class is going up. That's the public. That's the ones that's going to pay for them. Still, the language barriers are there, and so forth. But I mean, just in the South, I learned to know Vijay, the famous Vijay, a Tamil actor, and he has audiences like so many millions of people because he has people all over to Indonesia, for example. Not so much the northern parts, but even to Indonesia. So you have so much possibilities. I'm just curious to see there's things going on. And
Sophie, I mean,
what do you think about to get to your audience really? How do you go there?
Absolutely, yeah. Sophie, I mean, in terms of, there are efforts we both know of in terms of putting DVDs in bookshops, in terms of distributing them through different points of sale. I mean, it is largely. I mean, do you think would you agree that it's largely DVD, online, and actually to wait for TV isn't the right strategy?
Well, see, you have right now. There's a movement with environment hotels, okay, who don't have television in their rooms. So they normally have a foreigner, international clientele. So what they've done is that they've created theaters in these hotels, and they are stocking them with documentaries. Okay, and Indian documentaries. I just directed them to Persistence Resistance website, and so that they can pick up Indian documentaries, which they can stock in these hotels for international people to see on India. So there is that kind of stuff going on.
I just want to clarify a point.
Sorry, Judge, hold on a sec.
It is part of the process.
Pardon?
The audience is part of the process.
Yes.
Yeah.
So you already generally part of the process, and it's very important.
We're going to come back to that in a second. So let's just stay with this kind of outlet thing. I mean, you're basically right, I think. Would you, Amlan, in terms of you, let's turn to the kind of nitty-gritty of getting your film out there. How have you got your film out there?
No, I mean, she said that 0.01% of that whole population, but how exactly the problem is, how do we reach them? See, the thing is, theatrical release was still one option, small option, but still an option. That option has to be nurtured because it gives the film a life and a bigger, larger what should I say? I mean, profile and importance. And if see, the thing is, India is a very peculiar country, and it's got to do a lot with, you know, conviction and hero worshipping and stuff like that. So you got to really establish that profile, then it will work. Now, see, the thing is, I'm in really a crisis that, I mean, my film has to be taken to the people of India. This film is about democracy and it has to reach people. So I'm in a very desperate situation. So my direct plans are, there are a few theatre halls which is partly owned by the government, like Nandan and Siri Ford, all those places, where you can actually hire the auditorium at since you are a film school graduate and is a filmmaker, you can actually hire quite a low rate, but and then you can screen your film. That's one approach I'm going to take. But that's not all. I mean, I'm trying to see things in a larger perspective. See, all our small towns, even big cities and also small towns, had libraries. I mean, so I mean, those libraries are kind of, you know, defunct now because nobody reads books much and nobody goes there much. But Indians, our natural tendencies are to gather together to argue. We are argumentative. We debate, we chat, we do that. So what my plan is, first I'll try in Bengal, I mean in surrounding Calcutta, that I want to turn some of these libraries into audiovisual libraries. So they themselves can become small hubs of interaction that we used to have in chai shops. The chai shops culture is also gone because those are taken over by baristas. So the baristas don't, you know, that don't evoke you to argue and fight. And
that's a documentary right there.
Yeah. So that's what I'm trying to. I'm trying to get some funding, and I'm trying to also. That's what another way. I mean, I'm here to look for collaboration where we can systematic plan this movement. Then we have to give really maybe 5 years. I'm not talking about. I'm serious about it. Actually, it's not just for my one film. It's going to be a movement. Otherwise, we cannot. We have to create this audience. We have to create this debate. And then, see, the documentaries is whatever form. I mean, it actually evokes questions. It's questions and debates and whatever, interactions. So you have to really create the space. And the second, the next stage is, the thing is, now this communication has become pretty one-to-one. I mean, I don't mind getting distributed just to computers. I mean, and that's, in India, it's working very fast and very quickly. Even in remote places, people know, people can surf net. And so if we can create that culture and sort of create the importance about documentary, as an existence of documentary in that area, and I'm not talking about boring documentaries, I'm talking about really entertaining documentaries. The kind of films we are making is like...
Maybe put in some dance in every documentary also to...
No,
do like the Bollywood films.
No, the thing is, I mean, there are so many entertainment in India apart from dance itself. Like food is also an entertainment. Religion, for instance, will beat anything else.
Yeah. But I'm just curious, I come from Sweden, I mean, nobody goes to the cinemas anymore. It's like in Sweden. So it's declining. But in India, you have full houses, really. Families come, sit all day long.
But the thing is...
But that's also changing. I mean, that's... Really
yeah, it is.
Changing.
It is. But in the countryside...
I had a conversation at... there's a big film conference in Bombay, Vicky Frames. And I had a conversation with the guy who ran Reliance Industries. Reliance is one of India's biggest companies. And they're building multiplex cinemas. And I asked him, this is 2 years ago now, he was telling me about their plan for multiplexes. It's incredible. They're opening multiplexes everywhere. They're opening hundreds. And some of those multiplexes have small screens. And I think this is, again, one of those areas. And it's the same way Amlan's saying he wants input and network in terms of strategizing about how to prepare for audience engagement things. This is a huge opportunity. Whether you've worked in television and you know how to do event TV and build a buzz around something, whether you've done a sort of limited theatrical or a semi-theatrical release and you've used that as an event and as a shop window for your film, all of these skills, translated to the Indian context, you're taking the future in your hands, and that future is potentially enormous. And I think that, if any of you have those sorts of skills and interests, that's a very kind of fruitful way forward. I'm just going to go to Simon first at the back there.
Thank you. as a producer, I care about money. And what's interesting in all of this is you're saying that domestically there is no money from the broadcasters. And yet at the same time that you are talking about big name comedians, you're talking about hedge fund managers, and you're talking about the makers of tractors. And I'm interested why you think that is happening, and how do I get my hands on their money?
Absolutely, yeah, very good question. Who'd like to answer that? I mean, anybody else? I can kind of, I mean, as a similarly rapacious kind of, sort of not really Indian quasi-colonialist, sort of reverse it in a weird way, I've thought long and hard about this too. And it's about, at the end of the day, it looks in a very straightforward way, and this is a discussion we've had as well, Sophie and Nick. The demographic of people who watch documentaries is very interesting for people with money. They're people who are engaged, they're often people who are educated, they're part of the rising middle class. People want their attention, and just in the same way we're doing here, if we look at the documentary as an act of communication which forms a part of a broader act of communication on different platforms, that, I think, is why there's the interest, because people realise that the country's coming up and there's a market there, and it's still nascent. Would you agree, Gargi?
No, I'm not very into this particular discourse. I kind of spaced out a little bit.
Sophie, you're a Bombay girl. She's a Delhi girl. You're a Bombay girl. Come on, you guys know the role.
Well, I think it would be a lot to do with the fact, I think Javed Jafri, for example, is interested in documentaries. In fact, he put in money for a film last year, which is Inshallah Football. And he's interested in documentaries, and it's also about giving back in some kind of way. So what would you like to give back in some kind of way? How would you like to support it? How would you like to write off your tax, for example? Where would you like to write it off to? So might as well do it in an area where which you like. So that's how he's starting the foundation. By Mumbai, Mantra, frankly, is looking at documentaries as an investment.
That's who's doing the Sundance. They're running the Sundance Labs.
They're not looking at it as a fund. They're looking at it as an investment. So they want to see if they are investing a certain bit of money into a documentary, what is their returns on it? They want the entire business plan on it. I don't know about the hedge fund guys.
Yeah, well, hedge funds is different. I mean, the thing is, India. The thing when you go to India, you realise that there's how many major metro cities are there? 30, 40, 50? To do a marketing campaign for anything in India is a lot of money. And with the skills from documentary in terms of getting attention and building buzz without much money, that opens up possibilities. Because if you can get people's attention, then there are going to be money people, be they brands, be they corporations, be they a variety of different interests and reasons, be it philanthropy, be it engagement, they're going to start taking interest, and they are starting to take interest.
Can I just now come back in? After saying I don't want to be part of this. I have a little problem. My problem is with the lack of imagination that I see generally around me. And that lack of imagination is when, say, Reliance, which makes money out of making petrol without paying taxes, wants to open multiplexes, which is a format that has absolutely failed in the country. And there are histories, and I will not go into it, but I sense sometimes with the market this impatience to make money at any cost, and not enough attempt to sit down and learn from what has happened and what is going wrong and how to improve it. So while we are all looking at this little money that Sundance might bring in, this little money that such and such some actor might put in, the government of India today funds 52 documentaries every year on 35mm, each year. That's only one part of it. I'm not even talking about 10% of the government of India's money in documentaries. You cannot imagine the kind of money that the government of India puts in. What are the problems? Well, it's not possible to get it. The problems are structures and processes. Very, very difficult. Once we are able to create these as transparent mechanisms, I don't think India is going to look at that little money that will come in through Sundance or anything. We have the money there. The problem is in certain structures that, we were a colony, remember, and I'm not going to tell you whose colony. So the bureaucracy is intense and immense. Plus, there is a straightforward fund that exists, the Public Service Broadcasting Trust, which in collaboration with the Doordarshan does give money. So, you know, I think we're looking at different scales. And I sometimes feel that in terms of, you know, I asked one of these gentlemen who run multiplexes that why have you changed your scheduling of, say, film, cinema? How are you imagining cinema? And I sense this kind of this race. Everyone is running to catch up, and no one's kind of, it's like that Pink Floyd song, you know, sun goes back to come back behind you again. And no one really knows where they're heading. And so while there are all these intense talks about this coming and that coming, there is discovery which runs from this entire region. There is money, there is all kinds of processes, but we need to imagine it in a different way.
Did that answer your question, Simon? Beginnings, beginnings, beginnings. Opportunities and beginnings. And skills transfers. There's a lot of potential for all of that sort of stuff. So, you know, just going to go to this lady here, and then we'll come to that gentleman there. Did you? Yeah, back there.
Hi there. I'm not really Indian either. And
the other one is the non-respectable Indian. That's the other interpretation.
And my family are that as well. Yeah. And they're one of the despicable group that go back in December in the winter and go and live there and bring their money and do all of that. And in a way, you know, you talked about audience and you talked about Monsoon Wedding. My mother from here actually went to go and see Monsoon Wedding. It's something she'd never do. She actually went to the cinema on her own. And there's a big audience. We breed and we've bred and we've travelled internationally. And I, as a filmmaker, I'm based in the UK, but I, as a filmmaker, want to make a film about the family having left India but going back to India, but then exploring the roots in India, which I believe is an Indian story. It's an Indian documentary. But what I'm hearing here is actually, I'm not quite sure who the audience would be. Would there be an audience in India because we're that despicable group, the NRIs, who would watch it? Documentaries, you know, with those that are sponsoring the docs are the big actors who in some way want to salvage their conscience in terms of bringing money, you know, to these worthy causes. I have family that live in India that are rich and put their money back into supporting these causes. You know, it's that.
Have you ever lived in India?
I've never. No, I was actually born in East Africa.
Right.
I was born in East Africa.
I spent most of the last 3 years living in India, more time there than here, and I've always gone as a kid, but I never lived there. And the first day I arrived, Nilima Mathur, who works in Delhi, is a very experienced and fantastic filmmaker who's very plugged into the international arena. Her and her husband took me for a drink, and they said to me, "Your challenge in making this film is that there's a little bit of you, tiny bit that's Indian, the rest is this British idiot, and you're going to have to expand the Indian bit." And it took me 3 years. It took me till I went back in February, March this year to really get it. And then I got it. And they were right. So I think there is an audience for these sorts of films. But I think for diaspora, I hate to use the word, but NRIs or diaspora, I think there's a big challenge. I think there's a sort of assumption of knowledge when actually contemporary India is far more complex, far more advanced, and often sort of far more socially advanced. Because let's face it, most immigrants, when they leave their country, they take a mental snapshot and they hold on to that mental snapshot like a fading sepia photograph. And most of those people live like as if India's still in the 1970s.
Yeah.
So that's the challenge, I think, to that. Let's go
but what is your anxiety? Sorry, what exactly is your anxiety? I don't understand your anxiety.
I'm trying to understand whether the films that you're talking about, for example, is for Indians. It's for the Indian community. You know, as you're saying, you know, in the south.
I'm not. I'm saying
not you. When we're talking about, you know, where you want to get your films distributed to the Indian audience itself.
But only an NRI would say use the word Indian. Indians would say the Bengalis or the this or the that.
And also we would just say it's a, you know, you please go see this film that it's going to show today at 3:30. And tell me, why should only an Indian person watch it?
I completely agree.
Yeah.
No, I don't think Indian people should just watch Indian films. I mean, this is what Indians are about, as you say. We argue a lot.
This is the other side of your question. I think films are universal. I believe films are universal, otherwise I wouldn't be in this whole business. So if we start to create audiences into ghettos, already imagine audiences into ghettos, I think we're in a problem. I think films are universal. Yes, they might need some translation, there might be spaces for collaboration, there's need for upgradation of skills, but universal. So why is your anxiety?
So,
Sorry,
sorry, can I just ask one more question?
I'm going to come back to you because this gentleman's been waiting. We're coming close to the end, so excuse me. Sorry, over to you.
Later.
Like the gentleman behind, I'm a producer as well, and of course I'm interested in getting programs and content in front of 2 billion people, the 20% who are the rising middle class. That's fundamental. And it seems to me that a traditional country, well, like a lot of countries, a big, complicated country like India, you need a local partner. I mean, we're complete novices in this market, don't know anything about it. Although we found somebody who can help us do this in India. We found them on the internet, we rang them up, and we did a deal with them. But we don't really know them that well. How can we go about finding people to help us get to this 2.2 billion people? I mean, it's such a complicated market, and it seems to me that the only way you can reach them is via the internet. You know, you've got fantastic broadband connections, you've got God knows how many people, everyone's carrying a mobile phone. So how do we go about entering into this marketplace? Can you give us a bit of advice on finding partners or people or whatever?
Would anybody like to answer? I'm kind of thinking our esteemed session producer, Nick Ware, who's a former BBC executive and has been very engaged with India over a number of years. You've been looking into this a lot. Nick, why don't you give us a few words of your wisdom?
I'm not sure I have a direct answer to that question, actually. I think what I've been doing personally in the last few years that I've been travelling to India is trying to understand exactly that question and trying to address it. And I don't think at the moment there is a clear answer. I think that the market is not internationally focused in that sense. So I think a challenge as well for us is to bring the best of international cinema to India, because I think part of helping to grow Indian documentaries and helping to grow growing audiences is for them to experience the best of the best, wherever it's come from. So I think there is a big challenge in distribution. I think it's really interesting to see whether there is still a theatric life. I think the whole video-on-demand element, as far as I understand, there is a nascent video-on-demand industry in India, but when I've looked, I haven't really seen a lot of international film. I've seen a lot of local film, a lot of fiction film. So I think there's an opportunity, but I'm not sure the market has opened up yet. So somebody, and maybe it's you, is going to be the first pioneer to kind of find that access point. But yes, definitely broadband delivery, theatrical. It's the same kind of armory of distribution models that kind of we have everywhere.
Sorry, just take the mic. Sorry.
The market is so big that we'd make something specifically for the Indian market, I think.
Well, this is also one of the challenges, though. India has the high, in terms of foreign corporations and brands going to India, of all the different emerging markets, India has the very highest, by a long way, failure rate. Global brands that have gone all over the world and established themselves very successfully often fail in India. So there's a very specific there is an act of translation which is very specific to India, I think.
But
I think if you make a film on cricket, you'll get there. 2 billion people, bang on.
Well, that's exactly what we want to do, actually.
They will not watch the film on cricket.
A documentary on cricket or a cricket, athlete or whatever, you'll get there.
We have a lot of people come to our website from India, actually.
So could you tell us which comes here?
My name's Alistair White. We're British Pathé. We have the British Pathé archive. And we get a large number of people coming from India to look at our website. And almost exclusively they're looking at cricket, actually. And they're just looking at clips. So we quite like to extend that in some way and start making programs.
An area which Indian, like this corporation is interested in getting in, is to buy a documentary which they buy the rights to the documentary to make a fiction film. So that is an area where you can make money there.
I think I would want to own the film and take it directly to the viewer, even if they're paying a nanoscent. That's the bit that really interests me.
It's the sheer volume,
and
exactly.
I think that's something.
Such a huge market.
It's something I think we do, all of us, and I think one of the reasons we are doing the work that we are doing is because we see this potential. And I already see that I've been in business for 5 years, and we are a 22-year-old organization. We did 10 years of what he was talking about, going to different areas. I think in the last 5 years, I've seen our sales go up. And it's because there's a visibility that's coming in. Now we've also gone into stores. We are in 200 stores around the country. We are talking to theatres, and I think once we open up theatres, that would be another space. But I no longer see, and we are also negotiating with television, whatever there is. We have a kind of a understanding with the one television that does, it acquires, that films that we acquire, they will have a first right to. But you see, then we run into these international issues. We have just signed on a lot of Kim Longinoto's films, and this Indian channel was interested. But her last film is a Channel 4 film. And then, and now because of the diaspora, the Indian channels no longer are Indian, they're international. So I think we have to really look at rights clearances very soon. I mean, if you have to be looking at collaborative work, the way rights are held by television companies, I mean, they can no longer, it will not work. So rights clearances and negotiations. I don't know how many distributors are here, but are there any distributors? Okay. But that's another story. I mean, how the distribution royalties that go to filmmakers and I think these are the areas we'll need to talk further and look at collaboration.
I think there's a lot to be done. This is what really the hope is for this panel as well. I mean, this is the beginning of exactly these sorts of conversations, because it's really,
But I haven't quite got an answer to my question, actually.
I think it's because there isn't one yet. It's about creating one.
My question is how do we find a local partner to help us do this, apart from coming to events like this?
To distribute films. No, you write to one of us.
To help us create something, to help us get it on the right platforms on the internet, to negotiate with the mobile phone operators.
It's an emergent field. It really is. It moves. I mean, it moves. When you go to India now, you come back to Europe, and it's slow over here, guys. It moves so fast over there these days. The whole of Asia. It's such a pace, and it's that I'm trying to sort of just say in terms of. It's about, there isn't anything set up as yet. It's all emergent. Sorry, just wait for the mic cue. Sorry, just wait for the mic cue.
Producers Association.
I agree.
Right?
That's very
important.
That's what you need.
Most important.
Yes.
And something on the net which says companies, so you can go down photographers, editors, sound people in different areas of India, what their rates are. All this is what you need. Like,
absolutely.
Maybe this is something that, in terms of that, maybe that's something Pathé could come in on. The need for producers, the need for
professional
producers.
Professional producer associations, that's very important.
And associations. I think this is, and also we do need trained producers in India. We seriously lack trained producers, and that's a huge.
I would love to get trained to become a producer. I mean, I can manage the production, but raising finance is one big aspect.
It's all like he does his own camera, his own production. Mukul here is a camera person, filmmaker, and these are reasons. I mean, there are reasons why this has happened because of the budgets, but we seriously need production training.
That too.
I mean, this is the other area.
We've just got a couple minutes now. Let's go. I think this is a great conversation to carry on. I think this is a very important conversation.
I need to go to meat market.
Of course, we're going to wrap up now. Just give us 1 minute because we're literally wrapping up. Does anybody have any more questions? Quick one. Wait for the mic, please. Sorry, just wait for the mic.
And it works in the West where we don't have so much the culture of argument and gathering together to discuss things. And that is that you establish an online fan base. And then when you have that and you know where they live, you then hire a local cinema, book it out, and then you show your thing. And that's working. And so given that you have those predispositions to gather and discuss, you can build an online, you can even deliver the entire film online and people will still come to see the theatrical presentation, and you can guarantee to the multiplex or the cinema owner that you will fill it because you know these people will come.
Well, I think I'm going to call it to hope, but that I think is also another conversation which absolutely needs to. I'm going to stop but that absolutely needs to go on. Just before we do wrap up, I'm sorry, we've got so much to talk about, and hopefully we'll carry on straight after this session and over the course of the next few days. And please, the Indian delegation is here to make connections and links and to have these conversations and to get this stuff going. So please do kind of approach them. Just before we go, and in terms of, just to give you an example, we've so much we haven't even covered, but in terms of these innovations and in terms of doing things about audience engagement, in terms of finding new ways of monetizing things, Amlan, can we just finish with a little bit of a modeling show? Can you get up, please, and show us your... Amlan has been thinking of lots of interesting ways of making money for him and his cannabis-growing subjects, including what is it? A line of, you've got a fashion line, right? There's T-shirts.
Yeah.
Come on, get up. Let's see T-shirt.
First let me explain. I'll show. The thing is,
I'll model. Give me the bag.
Okay.
You talk, I'll model.
The thing is, it has T-shirts inside. So.
This is the wool from there, by the way.
These people are they're shepherds, so they produce very good wool, but which, they're very coarse and raw. Anyway, my whole idea right now is like to give a different, what should I say, the serious dimension to documentary. It's just not just a film anymore. It's just a matter of coincidence, what should I say? It happened in the process of filmmaking that the two children who are part of my film who had nobody to look after. So I kind of adopted them, and I'm giving them education and all that.
Okay, I'm going to wrap you there because we are late again. What I'm going to say is, please come and talk to Amlan. This bag is available to buy. So are the T-shirts. And let's carry on this conversation.
And well-known designer has done it.
And thank you all very, very much. Thank you, Ritu. Thank you, Sophie. Thank you, Amlan. Thank you, Gargi. Thank you all very much for coming. And see you again next time.